Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Come on in. We're just going to settle in to the space and let everyone arrive. And just making sure that you're muted if possible. Emma, are you able to keep an eye on the waiting room? Thank you. Wonderful. So welcome everyone to this space where we can really come together for the next 2 hours to be in devotion in our own way to the precious work of Circle. And I just really, before I began, wanted to thank you for being here and just share that I don't take it lightly that you're choosing to show up live, especially for those of us in the UK on such a hot evening. And I take your trust really seriously. So my job is to deliver an experience over the next 2 hours that I hope feels really rich and informative and insightful. So that is my intention. And we're all here because we feel drawn in some way to the precious work of Circle. And I'll define what I mean by Circle in a minute and perhaps hear from you about what you understand by that word. But our shared intention for this space today is to sit with this question together in your own way of whether Circle facilitation is the right next step for you. And I offer these spaces in a way that I hope feels deeply soulful, as well as really bringing quite a lot of pragmatism to this work, a sense of what is possible with this work, a sense of how you might take it out there. And it's worth saying that I am not a sort of snappy, pithy person. I am a slow and gentle person. And so the pace of this might feel quite slow, but that is part of this experience. We're going to try and slow ourselves down from wherever we have been and whatever we're carrying, kind of land more fully here. And I'll do some grounding work to help you with that in a minute. So I'll begin a little bit by sharing who I am, what Sister Stories does, and a bit of a sense of the sort of scope of our work. And I'm conscious, looking at the faces in this room, that I'm meeting many of you for the first time. And I don't know about you, but when I turn up on an internet event, I find it quite hard to get on board with what that person is saying unless I have a sense of who they are. So I'll be sharing a bit about me and my philosophy and my work. And then we'll create some space for you to really reflect on what you're seeking from potentially stepping onto the path of Circle facilitation, and to really, I hope, kind of open up a sense of possibility around this work and how it can be a meaningful path for you to follow as part of your paid work, not only in the coming months and years, but across a lifetime. And to help perhaps see into some of that possibility in terms of how it makes an impact in your life and the lives of the women it touches, I'll share with you what I call my Circle Compass model, which is a kind of tool to help you think about the different strengths and skills and capacities that you already have that will help you hold space powerfully, and where you have some room to grow, so that you can start to build the kind of Circle spaces that sort of sustain beyond, an occasional casual gathering, and actually become more of a body of work across a lifetime. And then at the end, for those of you who want to walk this path with me and do that more deeply, I'll share what I offer in terms of next steps. So, as I mentioned, my name's Gemma. I'm the founder of Sister Stories, and Sister Stories has grown into the UK's leading women's circle organisation. We train hundreds of facilitators a year, we hold hundreds of circles a year, and these women who train with us go into their communities to create really beautiful spaces of real world impact. But I think I'm going to be talking about circle a lot. And actually, before I go any further, I think we should maybe build a bit of a shared understanding of what we mean by that word, because we will each understand it slightly differently. So you all responded to an invitation called Is Circle Facilitation Your Next Step? When I say the word circle, what do you think of? What springs to mind? Maybe you can share in the chat just a word. Community, sisterhood, whole, power, something with no beginning and no end, inclusion, support, sacred space, sister love, collective, container, wholeness, beautiful. Community safety, connection, humanity, healing matriarchy, yes. Beautiful, beautiful. It's really interesting when sometimes I kind of meet people out in the world and they say, what do you do? And I say, well, I'm a circle facilitator. They say, what is a circle? And after all of these years of doing it, I have never managed to find a really pithy 1 or 2 liner definition. And there are many reasons for that. But one of the reasons is that it carries a sort of depth that transcends, forgive me, that pithiness. But I'm going to try and give a really sort of very simple working definition of the kind of space that I'm talking about when I talk about circle. At its simplest, a circle is a group of people in the kind of spaces that I hold, a group of women gathered often around a fire or a candle or a centerpiece, where there is a really sort of liberatory opportunity to speak and share stories and to be heard. An opportunity where each woman can share of her own life, of her own heart, in her own words, and be deeply witnessed without interruption, without being met with advice. The real simple power of sharing stories and witnessing together in community. That's one definition. Each time, excuse me, I shared that with you, I would define something different. But that's the kind of space and some of shape and some of the possibility in the space. And I'll be going into much more detail later about the sort of ways you can shape your circle to support that process. And I've described something that sounds simple, kind of almost too simple. And everything that I'm going to tell you tonight is in some way speaking to the ways in which that simplicity is deceptive and the things that I got wrong right at the beginning of my journey with Circle. So, excuse me, I've got a really tickly throat, so just give me 1 second, have a little sip of water. When I moved from being someone who was holding circles myself and weaving it into my own life, my own work. And then I started training other women to do it because people were coming and they were saying, we love this way that's so simple. How do we learn to do it as well? And I sort of thought, I don't actually know. And over months and years and lots of teaching and mentorship, I managed to develop a framework, which has been developing since 2018. But when we began, this little collective of us, we were learning to hold circles in our living rooms. That's where my journey began. I used to hold circles in my living room in London when I was living there at the time I started, and community centres and yoga studios. All of that was beautiful. And everyone who did that had a really strong sense of personal fulfillment and community impact. And we were doing something that felt like, this is good. And then over the years that followed, something quite extraordinary has happened. I have watched what I thought was quite a small, simple thing turn out to be one of the most profound and biggest things I've ever been part of. So those same women who began holding circles in their living rooms went on to hold circles in NHS clinics, in the diaspora of countries in crisis, on the front lines of protest, inside institutions I'd never have imagined circle reaching. And it really made me go back and ask the question of, like, what is the potential of this simple yet ancient practice to really have far-reaching impact in our society as a whole? And perhaps you here have a sense of that too. I mean, just for a moment, let's just imagine, let's think about the potential impact of this kind of space, a space for humanity, a space for being seen and heard. And maybe you might share in the chat any words or any ideas that come up for you. Restorative justice, yes. Remembering what connects us, healing. Brilliant, life-changing. Matriarchy, yeah. Community building. Love and healing. Justice, liberation. Wild, belonging. Empowering. The power and potential of this space is, I think, one of the most transformative spaces of our time. This work is not new, it is ancient. I did not invent it. It has been with the human species, quite literally from the Neanderthal times, story from another time, but there are research papers that back this up, and has been passed down through various oral traditions and lineages, and in many places in the world has been stamped out by the patriarchal, capitalistic, imperial drive to quite literally silence women and silence the power of these spaces. But there are some cultures and traditions who have kept this practice alive. And there are wisdom keepers who have passed this down through the ages. And at its core, it is not a tradition that's owned by any particular culture. It's indigenous to humanity. And there are so many ways that we can imagine this, which we'll be going into later. But I'm going to talk about that simplicity a little bit more and the kind of mixed mistakes I made around my own journey with understanding the simplicity of circle. I remember having pages and pages of journal entries from those early days of my practice, thinking, is this thing too simple? Is it powerful? Is it enough for me to be holding space for women to be seen and heard? And what I was worrying about there massively underplays it, because what we're doing when we create something that looks like it's simple is actually something hugely, hugely countercultural. One of the most powerful things about circle space is what it leaves out, what it liberates us from, the ways that we show up in everyday society, like giving one another advice, rushing into fits, talking over one another, people really centering themselves in a conversation. Almost every other room that we gather in is kind of run by the idea that response is the most important thing. You know, we react, we counter, we sort of cancel, we share our own version of that time this thing happened to us. And Circle removes all of that on purpose. And that single structural choice is one of the things that lets the sense of the masks we wear and the performances we feel we need to put on and the roles we play just drop for a moment. And then there can be a dissolving of hierarchy so that truth can actually land in the room. And there is such deep medicine in that simplicity. So that's the first thing I was wrong about. Simple is not enough. I've come to believe simple is medicine. The second thing that I was wrong about is that holding some circle was kind of like a lovely personal hobby. I'll tell you a bit about my story in a moment, but I started off doing it alongside my main job. And I thought it was something that was making a nice contribution to my community. It felt really healing for me to do it, but it didn't feel part of my real life or my real work. And there is a version for each of us where it can be. It can be part of our real work in the world. And it is a form of leadership. And I've come to think, as I've mentioned, that it might be the leadership skill of our age. You know, we're walking in this world and you'll all feel it in different ways. I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but the last 12 months have felt like this complete onslaught of where because of AI, I hate to bring AI into the conversation, but unfortunately it's so central, anything can be automated and generated at the click of a finger and faked. And the moment that that starts to become really prevalent in our culture as it is now, the thing that feels so rare and precious is the opposite of that. So real humans in a real room, the capacity to gather, the capacity to hold difference between these different humans with their different lives and different opinions in a room without it all fracturing, the ability to create a space where people truly listen. And I was thinking about AI this morning and I was thinking, wow, a machine is learning at breakneck speed to do almost anything. But what it can't do and what it will never be able to do is this: gather in this way, speak so deeply from the heart. I sometimes feel when I offer these calls, like I'm kind of literally handing you all my heart on a little plate and saying, this is the thing that I treasure. Are you with me? That deep yearning for being together as humans, I think it is going to become even more precious than it always has been. And actually, I mean, I could go on about this for years, but I think that in the working world, which is becoming much more precarious than it ever has, these are the kinds of skills that people are going to be looking for. It's going to be a cultural leadership skill. So there are sort of two things I was wrong about when I started holding circles. And the third thing that I was wrong about is the idea that holding space and holding circle space is some sort of innate gift that you can either do or you can't. And I've come to realize over the years, it's not a gift, although you will bring all of your innate gifts to it. And that's what makes it unique. And we'll talk about how you bring yourself into this process, regardless of who you are later on. But it's a craft, and holding a circle well takes real skill. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a circle space that's not very well held, but I know many hundreds of women who have had really damaging experiences in circle. And part of my mission is to equip people with the skills to try and avoid that happening. Really having the knowledge and capacities to hold a space well is a craft, and it's skilled work, and that skilled work can be learned. So we're going to be talking, when I introduce this circle compass, about what those kinds of learnings and what you might consider when you're crafting your spaces, because I'm hoping by the end of this, we're all going to go out and do some circles. Sorry, I lost my train of thought then with someone being unmuted. The words have gone. I'm sure they'll come back. We're going to try and work out how you can bring your uniqueness into your craft. So when I was sharing about this event, I said that one of the things I would do for you is talk about some of the things that I have seen happen when women really step in to committing to holding circle. And in all of the years of training women, I've seen some really extraordinary things happen. So I'll talk about just a few of them now, and then we're going to talk about you. We are talking about people who would never have considered themselves natural space holders. One woman in particular, Jane, she's a GP, and she somehow felt drawn to this work of gathering women in a group in her clinical practice, but she didn't know how. So she came and she learned how. And what she does now is she runs a menopause clinic as a GP. But instead of doing anything clinical, it used to be group consultation where everyone would be talking about their symptoms and the kind of, medical side of it. She runs it as a circle. And the women in the room share their experience of the menopause. And extraordinarily, over the year or and a bit that she's been running it, patients have reported feeling physically better because of that work. And she's won an NHS award. So it's not just the kind of, impact on her patients. She's literally been awarded an award by the NHS, such a mainstream body, about the power of this work. We work with therapists who really feel like they want to break out of the sort of walls of one-to-one and reimagine their role as a space holder. And we've had yoga teachers and massage therapists and opera directors and TV presenters and people who started something really small in their community and then grew it to a whole body of work. And we've had head teachers and police officers and people who've never worked and people who are mothers and are holding it alongside their childcare responsibilities. I'm mentioning all of these types of people who I've seen do amazing things with these work because it is available to any of us. It's available regardless of our background. It's available whether we feel like we're in a really solid place in life or in a moment of transition. And if I were to sort of name one shared quality that I see in all women who I've watched walk the path over the years of turning towards circle facilitation, it's that so many of them have this feeling within themselves that they had far more to express than that they hadn't yet found a vehicle for. They had far more to give and they hadn't found the shape of the thing to do it yet. Almost this like soulful yearning to be expressed, but not actually knowing where to channel it. Hannah's saying, hello, that's me. That was literally me before I began. I felt like I was hungry all the time and I didn't know what I was hungry for. And then I found this work and that's what it was. So that's what Circle can become, the vehicle. And if you've got that feeling as well, you are definitely in the right place. So that's a lot of me talking. I would love to hear from you. What's drawn you here? Why did you see this question that I posed? Is circle facilitation your next step? And say, I want to explore this. And just share in the chat. The yearning, having been too scared to start my own circle. Life coach who wants to expand. I'm looking for a new life, but no idea what it would look like. Yeah. Yoga teacher, want to incorporate sister circles into my practice. I can't find one in my neighborhood and want to start it myself. Beautiful. Grief support, where you don't have to talk or put a face on. Yes. Beautiful. The divine feminine, going to run retreats. Beautiful. I want to find a sense of freedom that's authentic and community driven. Just started running a mother circle. Where's this one? Larita, when I'm in circle, I feel connected and like an ancient part of me is remembering. I want to lead circles and integrate sound healing and cacao ceremony. Absolutely beautiful. That awakening and remembering can be so healing for us in the space. Beautiful. So there's a real sense that I can see in the room of those of you who are space holders already and have this kind of desire to expand and diversify your practice, and those who feel more of just an innate calling to this work and bring that spirit of curiosity and expansion and wanting to follow this path and kind of find out more. I'll tell you where I was when I began. I was in the latter category. So I came to this work not as a space holder by profession, but as someone who started their career in the television industry. I did all sorts of things, including making many very well loved documentaries on British television. And, there was this kind of relentless pace to that industry, and it felt way too harsh for someone like me who would consider themselves very sensitive, very gentle. But there was one thing that kept me going through that time, and it was this real sense that sharing our stories matter. This real sense that telling truthful, authentic stories is a bridge to remembering what it means to be human. I could feel it in the room every single time I interviewed someone. And often I would sit in the interview seat and I would invite someone to share their story, and I would get everyone from every walk of life in that interview chair. From the kind of famous Colin Firth, had a lovely interview with Colin Firth, that was a highlight, to people who'd never been asked a question about themselves in their entire life. And I noticed when I sat in that chair, whether it's someone who I kind of felt an immediate connection to, or someone I would never normally cross paths with in daily life, there was this profound synergy. In every single story that was shared by every single person, I would learn something new about what it means to be human. But most importantly of all, I realised, and it's such a simple realisation, but I think it's underneath all the problems in our world, we're more similar than we are different. There is this deep well of interconnectedness and humanity that connects us all if we let it. And when the idea of Sister Stories landed with me, it was as clear as day. It was this idea to create a community space for women to come together and tell the stories of their lives, to share their hearts, to weave this kind of thread of truth and connection and authenticity and hope between us all in the room. And one that actually would kind of ripple out into our lives outside the room in big and small ways. So that's what I was drawn to this work by. And I knew from those very early days that there was something very fundamental about this work that would change the course of my life forever. I just couldn't see it yet. I was just in the kind of like, okay, I'll show up for another one, and I'll show up for another one. And it's taken months and years and a lot of commitment to get to the place where this is my full-time work. But what I want to kind of ignite in each of you today is that sense that we have on a kind of collective level. It's one thing to think about doing this work on our own, but we've got hundreds of us in this room today, many of us who feel it in our bones that to save ourselves in these times we're in, we need to gather. We need to have spaces to remember our shared humanity. And you might feel this part of you that wants to sort of live life drinking from a deeper well of authenticity. A life that moves at your own rhythm, that matches your convictions and your deeply held beliefs, and is an expression of who you really are, not who the world has expected you to be. And I think it's really important to name that, in this moment we're meeting in, the impact of the ways in which violence is being enacted in our world in so many ways, our ecology, our bodies, our hearts, our homes, rampant division, which has always been there but is being surfaced in very ugly ways. We need each other more than ever before, truly. And Circle will not stop oppression or war or climate change or the kind of rampage of the billionaires and, dare I say it, the trillionaires. But it can create a sense of peace and purpose and connectedness in the places that we live and we work and we gather and we love. And I'm just curious how that lands with you as you hear it. It feels always really important to name when we're together that I thought I was doing this thing in isolation in my little living room when I started with 8 women. And then as it grows and I reach more and more people and I see more and more people doing it, there's this kind of groundswell of hope. I always imagine the globe at night with little fires everywhere of people doing their circles, gathering people in this way. And we're all doing it with our brilliant uniqueness in a way that works for us and having very tangible impact. And I mentioned earlier that this work isn't new, it's ancient, and that our ancestors knew the medicine of gathering and listening and ritual and storytelling. And we talked also about that hunger, that longing for something that you didn't quite know what it was. My sense is that our world shares that hunger. And we can each play our part in creating the kind of communal spaces that our world needs more than ever. So I'm going to ask you some questions to reflect on, and then we're going to go into a bit of meditation, a bit of grounding, so you can really land into this. And I'm actually, before we begin, I'm going to light a candle for our time together. I've been talking away without lighting a candle, and it feels important to do it. So if you have one, you might want me to join me in lighting it. And if you don't, I'll light one with a group. I'm going to ask you two questions. So I'll read these out a few times. And maybe the first time you can close your eyes and just hear it. And the second time, let it wash over you. And the third time, you might start to write if you've got a paper and pen. So, what kind of life do you want to lead for yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? And how does holding circle make this possible? What kind of life do you want to lead for yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? How does holding circle make this possible? What kind of life do you want to lead for yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? How does holding an attending circle make this possible? And I'm going to invite you to sit with those questions. We're going to take 3 minutes with them to really feel into it for you. And you might just want to free write and just see what arises. The questions are, what kind of life do you want to lead yourself? What kind of world do you want to live in? How does holding circle make this possible? I'll pop them in the chat. And hopefully you can see them there, Christina. Welcome. Just take a few more minutes with these questions. And then some of you are doing this already, but if you want to be witnessed in the chat. Want to lead a life of service and peace. Live in a world without angst, and Circle helps to facilitate these with like-minded individuals through connectedness. Bring peace to each. Yes, and Circle is a tool often used in peace and reconciliation practice. So there is a circle that's been running for about 30 years in Israel and Palestine called the Parents Circle. And parents who have lost their child at the hands of another, so Israelis whose children have been killed by Palestinians and Palestinians whose children have been killed by Israelis, sit together in a circle and tell these extraordinary stories. And the facilitators of that circle use it as a peace and reconciliation space between those in the room. It obviously hasn't solved the global problem, but there is something extraordinary that happens circle by circle. They've been doing it for 30 years. Anyway, I digress. Quite an important digression, but I want to live a life that's authentic, meaningful, and connected. Help others with grief and loneliness. I want to live in a world where everyone has value and worth. Find the missing piece. Use my legacy of expertise more authentically, and peace and a sense of freedom. And I don't know yet. Beautiful. I'm seeing the words authenticity, connection, peace, groundedness, a real sense of, I'm getting a real sense of impact that's important for many with the work. And we'll be talking later about how you can gain so much for yourself and also have real impact with others. And so we're going to shift gear slightly to help you deepen this question even more. And so you might want to close your eyes. You might want to soften your gaze if it feels more supportive to you to do that. And if it feels good, taking a deep breath, perhaps the deepest breath you've taken all day. Just noticing how it feels to be here, in this space, with hundreds of other women who believe in this work too, who hold those visions, who feel that deep pull to circle work. Some of you might feel that being in this space feels like a kind of coming home. Some of you might be feeling a little less sure. There might be patterns of feeling like an outsider or uncertain or that you don't belong. And that's okay. Just knowing here in this space we share that truly all of you is welcome. The parts of you that are uncertain and tender and unsure. You're in the right place. So as you sit there on your seat, we might imagine that we're gathered around a fire, shoulder to shoulder to shoulder in a circle. There's a woman on your left and a woman on your right. And in the center, the fire crackles. And as you sit here in this space with other beating hearts and breathing lungs, you touch into this sense that you're in the right place. That the part of you that drew you here tonight has found its home. And you sit here with hundreds of women across the globe. And that lineage of your ancestors before you, who gathered around fire to share voice and story and song. So as we sit here together, I want to invite you to turn towards something inside of you that brought you here. It might be a sense of knowing, it might be a sense of yearning, it might be a sense of hunger, it might be an instinct. And it might be something that actually, as you sit here, you realize that your daily life doesn't make space for. Many of you in this room have carried for a long time a sense that there is more soul and life and heart in you than you've found a place for. There's more capacity for depth, more that you're here to do than the shape of your life so far has been able to hold. And so I invite you to feel into that now. That sense of more that's in you. You don't need to really name it precisely, just sensing into it, feeling what might be there. The part of you that has this sense, perhaps, there's somewhere more soulful and deeper to go, that's been waiting for the right vessel or the right path or the right doorway to walk through. What does that part want you to know? I'm just really taking a moment to be with this and to listen. And again, it might feel easy or difficult to do this, and that's okay. We're just really slowing down here and creating the space, the opportunity, the sense of curiosity. And I'm going to invite you to bring that sense of more, that sense that there is more that you are here to do. And to sort of turn it gently towards this work, towards this precious work of circle. Imagining perhaps that the circle you're sitting in now is your own, that you are the one holding it. The women gathered because you called them. The fire lit because you built it, tended to it, created it as a kind of roaring hearth around which women can gather. And you are there holding the space with your whole heart and a sense of deep purpose and confidence. And I wonder, does something in you recognize that? Where might there be a spark of aliveness or possibility? Where do the doubts come? The voice that says, not me, or what about? It's really important we let those voices be there too. They're part of the process. And you don't have to be sure if the path of circle is for you in this moment. You're just really holding that question. You're allowed to genuinely not know the answer yet. But just stirring within you when you imagine really devoting some of your precious life force to this work. And just really sensing into it for a moment. In this space of silence and exploration and permission. Permission to feel wildly excited. Permission to have no idea what's going on. Permission to be really in the depths of doubt and the depths of calling. And just taking a final few moments. And then when you're ready, perhaps just feeling your feet firmly planted on the ground. Maybe taking a few deep breaths, opening your eyes if you've had them closed. Maybe having a stretch or a yawn or even a shake if that sort of felt a bit soporific and sent you into some sort of sleepy place. So how was that? What came up? I'm going to invite you to take around 3 minutes to write down and capture what emerged for you. And the invitation is to really write, to capture these impressions, these images, these thoughts, these senses. That more that's in you, that sense of, I have got something to offer here. And to notice what happened when you held it up against the work of circle. And we're just going to write about possibility here because we're going to have some time for doubt. Doubt deserves its whole chapter. We're going to have that. We're going to write with possibility. Perhaps just feeling into what it felt like to imagine you holding that circle of your own. And just really capturing when you're in this moment with these women who get it. What's there? What's alive? Rasna, could you hold this weekly? Maybe. Beautiful. Okay, we're just going to deepen this inquiry and then we'll have some time again to share. And I'm going to offer 2 questions. And I want to invite you to write with both as honestly as you can. And some of you have answered this already in some ways in the chat, but just see what happens when you deepen this inquiry. So the first one is, where do I feel some sense of clarity to committing to this path of circle holding? Where is there something in me that says, yeah, I know that this is the path for me? Where is there clarity? And we're going to have space for the doubts because I know all the doubts always come up. That's our second question. Where do I feel clarity about committing to this path of space holding? My whole being, my heart, in my dreams. I just feel ready. My compassion, in my bones. I just know I'm doing it intuitively. It's time to take it more seriously. I've been calling for this for some time. In my soul, there's a spaciousness to it. Beautiful. Feels natural, like I've been doing it for centuries. I know that feeling, Larita. Sometimes I feel like I'm 472 years old. Okay. Been so drawn to this work. I know I can do this, just not sure where to start. Beautiful. I hold a beautiful circle every week. It's pure magic. I encourage others to step forward and give it a try. Yeah, in my gut. Amazing. So many of you are actually having very visceral, bodily knowings. And that's what happened for me. It was like someone used the phrase in my bones. I felt it in my bones, this sense of calling. And, it's a couple of people have said, have commented that I am speaking confidently this evening. Let me tell you, that was not the case when I held my first circle. I was terrified of speaking in a group. And literally, when I held my first circle, I was shaking like a leaf. My voice was shaking. I was almost vomiting with nerves in the room. And I just had to name it in that first circle and say, it is so hard to share my voice in this way, in this space, and to be seen in this way, in this space. And perhaps you're feeling some of that too. What would it be like for us all together to experiment with sharing our voices, even when there's doubt, even when we stumble on our words, all these things? That was a really important, unknowingly, I'd created something very culturally important in my circle, which is that I believe that we should create spaces where even the quietest voices can be heard. Those who don't hold power, those who hold identities that don't always get heard first. There's a lot of dynamics in the room that circle can equalize with good facilitation. But much more than that, over these years, now I can speak and it flows and it comes out. And do I stumble over my words sometimes? Of course. Do I feel nervous before I held spaces? Every single time, without a doubt. Emma from the team will tell you that every time I'm like, why am I doing this? I can't believe I've got these people turning up. It's just part of my process, but I've normalized it as part of my process and I haven't let the doubts take over. So part of our work together is to really make space for doubt. So we're going to just name the doubts because it's equally as important as the calling. Where do you feel that sense of doubt or hesitation or that sense of like, not me, not yet? What about, like, just get them all out on paper? And as we're doing that, before we do that, the doubt is not the enemy or the sign that you're on the right path. Some of the most devoted facilitators I know arrive full of doubt. And part of their work, as it was with my work, was to let the doubt really coexist alongside the learning and that soul path that we've named. And so, really, just take a few moments to let your pen move. Imposter. No one will sign up. I'm so fed up of hearing that women working together creates competition. Yeah, doesn't need to. Not in this space, not in this culture. As a circle facilitator, you're a culture maker. You create the culture of your space. Non-competitive, and it can ripple out. It will be a flop and boring, don't want to be seen, imposter syndrome. Will they turn up? Will I waver? Will I have the energy? Will other people get it and want to participate? I really had that one, Katie. And good news is I've discovered that lots of people do. The fear of being judged. Have I got the credibility? What will people think? Yeah. I'll be a complete disaster. Where to start? My doubt is always, do I have the time to create and manifest this idea at my age? It's a good question. I saw you share your age earlier. We've had many women in their late 70s and 80s run really beautiful spaces with this work. No one will say anything and it's going to be totally flat. The logistics of it, the space, the costs. Yes. So there's a real sense that I'm feeling here of the kind of internal barriers, the lack of confidence, the doubt, the fears about nobody showing up, the very understandable human wobbles and wavering about, can I do this in this way? And then there's a kind of more logistical, what if no one shows up? What if no one signs up? What happens if no one says anything? What if the entire circle is silence? And there's this really interesting tension that I hold within myself and that I've seen come up over all these years of supporting facilitators is that, as many of you've named, I feel like for so many of us, this work is in our bones and our hearts and all the other visceral places you mentioned it, and we feel it completely. This longing to gather, to hold space, to sit in a circle. We had such a visceral reaction earlier and such a sense of recognition. But it's the part that we get confused about, I often think, is that because that pull is innate and in our bones, that somewhere along the line, we decide that we should already know exactly how to do it and exactly how to meet the uncertainties of the space. And that if it was kind of truly our path, we would just know what to do without carrying a single doubt or block or barrier. And then when we don't know, when we feel like we're unsure or unqualified, or maybe like we're fumbling, we can perhaps take that as proof of like, oh, that this isn't mine to do. Not for me, because those voices are too loud. And I want to sort of gently take that belief apart, because I think there's two different things going on here. That pull is innate and the skill is learned. We talked earlier about how this is an instinct and it's also a craft. And, it's a learned skill in exactly the same way that, other modalities, coaching, Reiki, meditation, any kind of good space holding is. Nobody expects to sit down as a coach and instinctively know how to do what to do, or a yoga teacher would never just rock up without training. It's not to say that people can't guide movement without training, but you know what I mean. Like, there are many modalities where there is an acknowledgement of the craft, and I think that part of our opportunity together is to be in devotion to the craft of circle by really apprenticing yourself to the skill. And we're going to talk about different ways that might do that in a minute. I've got a framework to offer you so that what we're talking about tonight doesn't kind of feel a bit, sometimes you go to things, you're like, this is all wonderful, but I can't kind of grasp it. I'm going to give you something that will feel hopefully quite helpful to hang on to and take it with you. So there will be a replay of this. You can come back to it. The replay will be available for a few days. So I'm just going to share my screen so that you've got something visual for this one, because I think you need to be able to see what I am talking about. So let's see if I can find it. Oh, it was there and it's gone. Can you all see that? Maybe you can give me a thumbs up. Okay. I can see some nods. I can basically only see Marta, and I saw a nice little nod from Marta. So thank you. Let's talk about the circle compass. This is something that I've only shared a couple of times, and I hope that it provides you, often people expect knowledge to travel in a straight line. It's a very patriarchal idea that knowledge travels in a straight line, that you begin in one point and you end in another, and that there's an absolute trajectory to get there. And this work of circle is more like a spiral. It's more complex than that. So rather than having an absolute map with a solid destination on the way you're trying to get there, it's much better to have a compass that you can orient to, that you can really hold and be flexible with during your practice. So I'm just going to share that. I can't see the chat while while I'm doing this. I'm just going to move my screen so I can see better because it's gone all funky. Let's see if I can do this. Bear with me. So we're going to talk about different elements. We'll go into each of these in lots of detail. The cell, your inner landscape, your nervous system, the practice of inner inquiry, your sovereignty as a facilitator, the root of presence, truth-telling, and leadership. I always share when I offer this work that we have to begin with ourselves. The circle space is really rooted in our own ability to hold ourselves. And so we'll dive into what I mean by that shortly. Then we've got story, the language of circle, the human bridge, the thing that allows listening and witnessing and belonging through story. Then we've got the space, which is the container, how you really shape this in a responsible, ethical way. So bringing trauma-aware design, a sense of safety, although we'll talk about safe being a really problematic word. No space can ever truly be safe, and we'll dive into that shortly. But the structure that you bring. And then we're going to talk about society and the wider ripples. So its potential for cultural repair, collective care, impact, integrity, tenderness, and interdependence. So we'll dive into each of these one by one. And hopefully this will give you some inspiration for your spaces and also help you, I talked earlier about the kind of doors that can open within you, help you feel into some of the possibility of these kind of spaces. So there are always 3 levels your work reaches, and each part of Circle Works is always sort of simultaneously operating on 3 levels at once. The impact on you, the impact on your circle, and the impact on our collective. Let's talk about you. As you do this work, as you show up, time after time, circle after circle, pouring your heart into this, really holding yourself through the fears and the doubts and the ups and the downs, really being immersed in such a magical container that has a very unique thing about it. How you move through the world can shift. Here's the thing that surprised me most about circle work. It's one of the only forms of work that I know, and I'm sure there are others, but that I have come across in my lifetime and my lived experience that feels so deeply reciprocal. It's not there for my healing as a facilitator, but it does heal me as I offer it. Each and every time I sit in a circle space, something in me heals, something in me softens, something in me widens, something in me expands. I've had such an extraordinarily difficult time in my personal life for a very, very long time. And I'm not going to go into the details here, but it would, I think it would be quite hard for some people to hear what's happened. And the thing that's kept me going is circle work, is having this place that somehow has become my job, that has allowed me to root into something greater than me and to have such a sense of contribution and allow me to grow within it. So we always want to really make sure that this work is nourishing you. And then related to that, people often think that their circle is about what they do in this space. And of course, what you do matters. I talked earlier about that act of culture making, that creation of a space where those in it can really feel the way that you want them to feel, experience the things that you want them to experience. But what you do only counts for so much. It is so much about who you are in the space, the extent to which you bring your heart, the extent to which you can really hold yourself with I often think about us developing deep and wide roots beneath our circle work. The more rooted you are in this work, the more of an impact you will have on your circle. And it's interesting. I very, very early in my space holding days, I went on a 6-month space holding training. And it was in person, and it was a whole weekend a month for 6 months. So we did spend a lot of time together. And there were absolute expert teachers and loads of practical things. And it was a really well-held course in space holding. At the end of 6 months and all those hours and all that time, I could not tell you a single tool or technique that I learned. Not one. Couldn't name one. Couldn't say these are the tools and techniques I learned. But that's not a bad thing, because actually what I learned in that space was about the quality of presence that's required to hold really transformative spaces. And the fact that I didn't learn a single tool or technique in a sort of formal sense, of course, we were learning things all the time, but it was very, very formative in my space holding experiences. It's about who you are in the space. And then we've got the collective level. So when you show up in this way, we've touched on this already, and so many of you wanted to contribute to this. You're supporting the kind of growth of a gentle and authentic and more relational kind of leadership. So to really expand on self. In my experience, I've seen it to be true that you can only hold others as deeply as you are held within. So many people start holding space with really good intentions, but without a sense of themselves being held. We really want to encourage you, if you're going to take this work out there, to find places and spaces and people who can hold you. Because your body and your presence and your nervous system are really the foundations from which this space is created. When we train facilitators, we do we do lots of feedback on their circles, and the difference between the people who really shine and the people who feel like they're going through the motions is this: presence, nervous system, heart. And sometimes people think that the kind of this stuff of like, okay, fine, I'll cultivate some presence, like it's something to rush through before the real work. This is the work. This is the work, the cultivation of these deep and wide roots. Because circle it asks you to be the vessel rather than simply learning a script. So there are 10 million people on the internet who will offer you a circle structure and script. And that's not to say that that is wrong. There are many people doing wonderful things in that space. But the truth is that a script is no good, because what you're working with in circle space is emergence, the unknown. And a different way of saying that is human beings are inherently unpredictable. You cannot control what happens in a circle space. And so you need to really learn to create and be responsive to a relational feel. Something that you are always in conversation with in the circle. And we touched on this, but I often find for so many of us that this is a journey of coming home to your own voice, your own truth, and your own groundedness, so that others can do the same. So we always want to start with you, really rooting into that. See if I can get the next page. Here are some questions to take away, and you will get the recording tomorrow. So you might want to write them down. You might want to wait for the recording. Where do I feel well resourced, and where do I need more support? And this next question is about where your own groundedness meets the body and being of another person in your space. Can I stay grounded when someone else is dysregulated, or do I get pulled in? Have I got clear boundaries with participants and with myself? Am I willing to be in process, to be a student of this path again and again? I mentioned this work being a spiral. I am a teacher of this work, but I'm a perpetual student. It humbles me. It shapes me year on year. It shows me the things I haven't seen yet. It constantly asks me to widen my own lens on the world and how I'm showing up within it. It challenges me. It's a rich old path. Do I have my own spaces of support, healing, and reflection? And then this final question is more actually about when you start to spread the word about your circles. It can be really helpful to think about, can I name the moments I've been shaped and softened by this work? Like, can you really communicate an embodied sense of what it's done for you? So that's the cell. And we've got story. I talked about it earlier as a human bridge. The act of listening and witnessing and creating that sense of belonging that so many of you named earlier, and a real sense of connection through story. And again, we begin with the self. So there is something very powerful that I have noticed as a path to circle facilitation, which is learning to tell your own story with the kind of honesty and generosity that feels like a liberation, both for you, really having that powerful experience of being witnessed and seen and heard. But also, we cannot, at least I don't think, you can tell me what you think. I don't think we can, in good conscience, ask people in our spaces to really share their stories if we have not generously offered our own. Now, that doesn't mean that you always need to be telling your story in your own circle space, although you might choose to. That is one way to do it, and sometimes that's appropriate. But it does mean speaking it aloud somewhere. I often think of this kind of web of story sharing, which we're all, is part of that rich interconnectedness that I talked about earlier. Then we've got the power of story in your circle. So stories create a bridge between listener and speaker, and they're such a powerful tool for healing. This is not kind of me just, making this up. There are so many studies, so much evidence about the absolutely fundamental importance of story in our understanding of what it means to be human. They are literally, from day one, how we have understood what it means to be human, how we relate to one another, how we pass down knowledge. And there's a really amazing process that happens in the brain called neural coupling, which is when someone shares a story, they find flashes and moments of recognition that creates this kind of sense of identification and synergy and similarity and belonging to the human race that we touched on earlier. I think that that's why they're so healing. It's healing to speak aloud, and it's healing to listen and witness. It moves in both directions. And so on a collective level, through this act of sharing story, we move away, we have the opportunity to move away from polarization and a sense of entrenched difference to this deeper sense of connection, compassion, and possibility. The more we can listen to others' stories, the more we can understand one another and build a collective sense of possibility. And so, some questions for you with story. I've not got to the questions yet. Sorry, I'm jumping my gun. So it's how we build bridges across difference. It's how we remember we belong to each other. Story's relational. Half is what's spoken, and half is how it lands and moves in others. And I often think that empathy doesn't arise from agreeing with each other, but it arises from resonance, where we can begin to inhabit others' worlds and, the old walk a mile in their shoes, understand a little fraction and fragment of what it is to be them. I think that can be very, very fertile ground for building empathy. But they've got some caution with story. Without very clear intention and very carefully being held, it can slip into more of a sort of performative act or trauma dumping. We've all been in a space where, it's been used to really, really lay everything out. And I should qualify that because I think I sometimes have a bit of a reaction to the phrase trauma dumping. I think it's a bit, I don't like it very much, but I'm using it here because it's a kind of shared language. It's really important that we can hold space for challenging stories, but there must be some guidelines and guardrails in our spaces around it entirely becoming a space to lay out the trauma of an individual. And, we talked about advice giving earlier, and how important it is to avoid doing that in many spaces. Now, some people do choose to give advice in circle, and there is a place for that, but I find that there's a real liberation in not doing it. So, the facilitator's role really isn't to control the story, but to create a space sacred enough to hold it. And I learned this sort of craft through the world of documentary. In documentary, you're following real people's lives. You cannot control the outcome. But what you can do is you can contain the story and you can help create the conditions for something really interesting to emerge. And there's a parallel there with the story. So let's talk about the space. It's a sacred container. We want to bring to our spaces some trauma-aware design, a sense of containment through intentional structure, the kind of liberation of spacious holding. And again, we've got our 3 levels this works out. In your life, what you model in the space can ripple out to your personal life, your work life, your way of being in the world. It's happened for me and it's happened for so many others. So Emma, who's here from the team, who trained with me in 2022 and now is an exceptional space holder and part of the team of Sister Stories now, she often shares about the way that this rippled out into her personal life and her family life and the relationships that are most dear to her in a really tangible way. I have found the same. There is something about repeatedly holding space for others in circle and hearing their stories that can't help you show up as a more connected, compassionate individual everywhere. Your circle has got the opportunity for your participants a really profound personal transformation in a very gentle way. Like, we're not trying to force an outcome. I always say that circle is an experience-based space, not an outcome-based space. We're not trying to drive anyone in any particular direction, but there can be something very profound that happens there. And then our collective. The circle becomes a place to kind of rehearse the kind of society we want to live in and practice these strong foundations of compassion, non-hierarchy, and collective care. So the space is the medicine. Not only the stories that are shared, but the strength of what the space can hold. There is something very powerful about stepping into a container, a consciously created space, an environment where you can really feel how robustly that's being held. Even if you don't actually know what the facilitator is doing. I don't know if any of you have ever been to this kind of space, but you walk into a room or you come to an online space and you just feel that holding. And if you were to Google sacred space or to search it on Instagram, there's a lot of very beautiful aesthetics. And the aesthetic can be very important. The way your space looks and feels and smells and sounds, all of that can be wonderful. But I'm very, very passionate about creating really encouraging all of us to not prize the aesthetic above everything. So sometimes people get put off facilitating because they think, I don't look the part, or I'm not aspirational enough, or I'm not beautiful enough, or I'm not young and long haired with flowing robes. And, none of that actually matters. Although if you were to look up Women's Circle, you'd see all of those things. Sacred space has nothing to do with aesthetics. It's created through tone and robust agreements. And as we touched into earlier, the facilitator's personal presence. It's a container that is at once emotional and energetic and structural and ethical. And so none of that requires you to be any particular way. And then this is a whole conversation that we could talk about for probably a year, but we can never truly create a safe space. A safe space doesn't exist because what feels safe to me will not feel safe to you. And our own sense of safety, because we will each have a sense of like, oh yeah, I've been in a space where I do feel safe. It's not to say that we can't individually feel safe, but a facilitator cannot provide us with that experience. It differs across our identity and the trauma we hold and our lived experience. So instead, in Circle, what we look to create is either sometimes it's termed safer space, i.e., we're really holding that intention to cause as little harm as possible, or brave space. Brave space is a term that comes from social justice movements. I first heard it in a book called, I think it's called The Art of Effective Facilitation. It's a kind of social justice facilitation book, lots of essays in there. And there's also another book called Holding Change by Adrienne Marie Brown, where this is covered. But brave space has a sense of responsibility around rupture and repair. And actually, do you know what I think brave space is at its essence? And I've never kind of articulated this way before. It's being a grown up who's not defensive and who's willing to say, I hear you, I see you, I'm sorry I hurt you, I was wrong. And so that is one version of circle space that we can create if we have the tools. And so I talked earlier about craft. Transformation doesn't happen by accident, it happens in a well held space. And the key skills it takes are having the circle architecture, kind of energetic tracking of what's going on, a sense of ritual design, pacing, some safeguarding protocols. I don't want to kind of scare you with the word safeguarding, but it's really important you have a sense of if you're taking people to deep places, what you might need in place to really be able to hold them who are carrying deep trauma. And kind of like the integrity of the space. So I've put spatial and digital space integrity. So if you're in person, how is that space quite literally being held? What's its containment? Where is it? And then if you're holding a circle online in a digital way, and I do both, how are you again creating a sense of containment? So space is the medicine. I've said this already, haven't I? Forgive me. I've gone backwards, not forwards. Let's get to society. So many of you named that earlier as feeling important. The wider ripples, cultural repair, collective care, impact, integrity, tenderness, interdependence, all these things matter. What I love about doing this work is in the your life category, you can stop compartmentalizing these values. Part of your work can become an expression of who you are and what you believe. For me, circle is part of my activism in the world. And wow, when you have that deep sense of congruence between your values and what you're doing in the world and your contribution, there can be this deep sense of peace in the body. I think I would find it very hard how to channel my grief and my anger and my worry and my sense of injustice in this world if I didn't have shaping circles as an outlet. Because I'm so grateful for this practice. Then your circle. So if you design for safer or brave space, participants can go deeper and circles move from a kind of space of catharsis, we're like, oh, I've let it all out. And that kind of like, oh, that feels good to just get it all out there, to change where people feel connected and activated within them. So there's something more subtle happening than catharsis, something more subtle happening than an outpouring of emotion. There is a deep sense of interconnectedness as human beings. And then from the collective level, this is the moment we stop trying to heal alone, where we can say goodbye to individualism, where we can create a cultural movement of relational leadership and listening and a true sense of the collective. And I often think that Circle can become a kind of rehearsal room for a different future, one where we weave genuine community, experiment with new ways of being together, because it's quiet and it's slow and it's radical. And Adrienne Marie Brown, who I mentioned just a moment ago with their book Holding Change, writes an emergent strategy. What we practice at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. What we practice at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. And so we do that here. Each of us is bringing our own unique thread of who we are, how we hold space, and offer sacred medicine to our groups and to the world. And that ripple effect, we don't gather to escape the world. We gather as an act of cultural repair. And the kind of key skills there are brave space principles, anti-oppression work, and ethical leadership. So you see all of these elements of the compass, and you will move between each of these things in your circles at different moments. It's like a kind of constant orientation between all parts of the compass. And so some questions for you to hold. About your path. How do you want to live your life in the next 1, 5, 10 years? And what real world action are you taking? What could Circle actually become in your life and your work? So just really taking a moment with those questions. Just seeing what arises. We talked about that sense of congruence a moment ago. The congruence between the inner desires we hold and the outer action we take. And so I'm just going to stop sharing this so I can see all of you for a moment. It feels strange to be talking and not seeing you. Five or 10 years, maybe I'll be doing extended circles in a retreat by Mother Water. I recently quit my job to focus on full-time, building an audience on IG before I start hosting, putting a 4-week container together and practicing one-to-one settings with family. I've moved 360 miles, bought a house with a beautiful room at the top. It came to me this would not be our bedroom, but a place where I could hold healing circles. This is another step on that path. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. I'd like to hold circles in nature. I can see this being a movement. The person who just said I can see this being a movement. When I started doing this, I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to reach 10,000 women with this work? And in the last, in the years I've been doing this work, over 40,000 women have accessed either free or paid circle training. And so if you think about if each one of those women just did one circle in their lifetime with 10 women, what would happen? And what would happen if those women did 10 circles in their lifetime, where they hold 100 women? And it goes on. And so I really think that we have the opportunity to make this a movement. And if you'd said to me that there would be all those women going out and doing it, I wouldn't have believed you. I just didn't have the vision that was possible. But it's such a powerful thread, and each of you really can contribute to it in your own way. We're just going to check in with where we are. So we've talked about the pull that you feel to this work. We've kind of looked at the map or compass, or not a map, it's a compass, isn't it? I said it wasn't a map. We'll call it the compass still, and the kind of terrain in this work. And you've seen where you stand in it, you know, the places where you might feel, yeah, I get that bit, or the places where you feel like you need work. And we're going to just come to this question, which I talked about earlier, you know, the question that this evening is named around, which is circle facilitation your next step? And it's not that thing that came up earlier, that are you good enough? And it's not, are you ready? Because no one actually truly is ready when they begin. The real question is this the direction I want to commit to? Is this the thing worth building some of your precious life around? And you probably can't fully answer that question on just a feeling. And it's probably helpful to get a sense of real possibility about this for you, not just as a soulful practice, but it's real paid work that you build over the years. When I began, I had no idea how significant that this would be in my life. And I wish I'd had a clearer sense of what could be possible to stop all those years I did of hand wringing at the beginning, of wondering whether I was being really silly, thinking that I could hold circles as actually part of my job, because I didn't have any role models for it. I had some mentors in America who were brilliant, but it felt like they were living very different lives to me. You know, they were like aspirational, you know, they were beautiful, they had impeccable houses, they had a healing temple in their house, and this kind of like spiritual influencer chic look, despite being actually very full of heart and integrity and absolute skill. But I sort of ruled myself out, firstly on sort of aspirational and aesthetic grounds, if I'm really truthful. And secondly, because it seemed impossible to me that you could make this a meaningful part of your paid work in the world. I just didn't believe it was possible. So I'm going to tell you what I wish that someone had told me then, because it's turned out not to be impossible at all. And I've watched hundreds of women build their own versions of this since. And so I'm going to show you some sort of possibilities of what this might look like. There are so many different paths. So I talked about, you know, the way this has been taken into the NHS by Jane, the GP. There's a sleep practitioner who's just been booked at a major wellness festival to run this alongside her other workshops. There are people like sound healers and yoga teachers who add this skill of really being able to deeply hold groups and building loyal communities and sold out retreats. You don't need to leave what you're doing at the moment or burn it all down. You can, for some of you, bring the practice of circle into it so that your existing work gets deeper and richer, and often a new kind of income stream can open alongside it. So there's that path. For some people, it's more of a practice that they start to build sort of alongside their existing life. So that's what I did at the beginning, like a fortnightly or monthly circle in their community that grows as you do, seasonal gatherings, something that becomes a kind of little soulful sanctuary that crucially is paid. And I'm going to talk about payment in a minute, because I know that lots of people don't like talking about it in relation to circle work, and I'll share why I think it's so important that you do. And then for some people, it becomes their main body of work. So retreats, corporate spaces, institutional spaces, funded and commissioned work with circle at the centre that they build over years. None of this is a right path. And I often think that the woman running one beautiful monthly circle is doing this work with the same amount of impact and integrity as those who are holding massive retreats and taking circles into corporate spaces. It's the thing that I don't like to talk about, but I've touched onto it, so I'm going to. This is paid work. I believe that we should be paid for this work. Facilitation is a legitimate skill and one that I hope in this world we're moving into will be deeply valued. And I share this because I think that so many of us have inherited the idea that sacred work should be free and that the idea that you should be in service by being a martyr, that's patriarchal conditioning. And it's the same old script that's had women give endlessly and receive nothing. So charging for Circle isn't a betrayal of this work. It's a way of saying my work is important and it can resource me. And I'll be really truthful with you. I'm a single parent. I have two very small children. I left my relationship while I was pregnant with my second, a scenario that nobody wants to go through. One of the only reasons I was able to do that was that I had taken my circle work seriously and built up some savings to be able to leave. How many women in the world don't have the opportunity to do that? Like it was life or death. It was so important that I had that. It's important for each of us in different ways. And so I'm going to get really specific with some numbers about money in circles because, again, I don't hear people talking about this. And I do not like people on the internet who are like, make money from this thing, make money from that thing, that whole noise. I don't want to be contributing to that. But what I do want to give you is a sense of possibility. So when I was beginning circles, I earned around £250 a month from them alongside my day job. That was the start. And it's grown over the years into my whole livelihood. That didn't happen overnight, but it built from me holding circles in my living room to people committing to 3 and 6 month journeys where I started to earn a more substantial income. And then building it and building it and building it over the years, retreats, memberships, corporate work. And I've always had built into that scholarships and accessible pricing built in because I think that being both well paid and generous can exist. And I think that we don't want this work of circle to be the sort of preserve of only those who have the finances to access it. That's not what it is. So you finding a way for it to sustain you and also be as accessible as you're able to make it, given the resources that you have and the season of life that you're in, is really important. And it's, the trajectory of it is, I saw someone share in the chat earlier, like fires and crystals are not my thing. That is okay. There are so many ways to do this work. You begin by starting small and finding your voice and finding your path. And the work deepens and its impact deepens as you really refine and find your themes and your people and your voice. I had someone who trained with me some years ago who sat in lots of the kind of circles that I hold, which are quite slow and tender and gentle and a lot of emotional depth. And she got a few months in, she was like, I don't want to do that. I'm really sorry. I find it really hard to sit in your space because I need energy and I need joy. And so she went off and held joy circles and celebration circles. And I loved that pushback of like, wow, your way of doing it is not for me. Here's my unique energy. So you begin to find that for yourself. And then in the years that follow, it becomes a body of work, something that you're still building a decade from now that grows deeper and richer as you do. And I don't mean rich in a monetary sense, I mean richer in its texture and its offering, and a practice that you can hold across a lifetime. So when you ask yourself, is this my next step? This might be part of the answer. Circle can be the vehicle for the work that you're really called to do in the world. So if you were to commit to this, and without the whole plan perfectly laid out, just a sense of it, what would it look like for you? The body of work idea might be too big. Where would you begin? And I'm curious where you've landed in that question of, is circle facilitation your next step? How's it feeling? I'm conscious of the time. And I want to really just honor the different places that different people will be in. So some of you will really feel this very strong, visceral yes. I want to do this. You'll just know that it's for you. Some of you probably will have a more subtle yes, which feels a bit less like certainty and more kind of like a gentle pull in this direction. And I often think you don't need to be really certain about this. You just need to be honest. And if that is you, welcome to the path. You have got such a beautiful life ahead of you. And I'll be sharing more about those I support with this work in a moment. Some of you will be having like a not yet feeling, like, okay, I really feel the pull to this, but this just isn't my season. It's not my time. I think there's really deep wisdom in that. And you may find your moment in the future, or it may never come. And I think that that's okay. And so I'm sure that some of you will be in that, like, I'm just not sure about this. And I want to really honor if you're in that place. And then for some of you, you will have that very deep, beautiful clarity that you honor this work and you appreciate it, but it's not yours to hold. And if that is genuinely you, I'm really glad that you know that and that you perhaps have received perhaps some clarification about that this evening. I think it's really helpful to sense into when something isn't ours to do. You know, we might be interested in it, but it's just not for us. And so really taking a moment to feel into where you are. And then for those of you who feel like you are really interested in building this into something meaningful, I'm going to share how I work with women to do that. And this will be for some of you, it won't be for all of you. And so just feel in to how this lands. So for the past, I'm going to share my screen. I think, again, it's helpful you to have some images here rather than just me talking. I have been running this training since 2018, and it has become the greatest joy of my lifetime to apprentice other women in this craft. And I'm going to talk through how that apprenticeship happens. And it's worth saying, I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation for you now, but Learning Circle is not a PowerPoint presentation kind of thing. This is what Salma, one of our recent graduates, said. This training weaves together deep compassion, attuned attention, depth of insight to provide a comprehensive and heart-centered course. Going through this training is a totally immersive experience, which makes you feel like you've fully embodied the teachings by the end of the course. So let's talk about how we actually do that. This path of training with us is an apprenticeship, because you don't learn about circles by reading about it. You learn by being held by teachers for whom this work is already bone deep. Those who can hold circle at a moment's notice, or who can really hold a retreat that changes how a woman understands herself, or a room of women understand themselves, or can create something for thousands. Teachers who are steeped in this craft, who have teachers before them, who have teachers before them, who are part of a rich lineage. And all those things that I've just named, the holding a circle at a moment's notice, or even creating something for a room of thousands in a circle type way, I have done. And somehow this is rather unbelievably my life now, but I had to get there. And the way that I got there was through being apprenticed by teachers and mentors who had already crossed those thresholds that I was standing at. So those things we named earlier, the fear, the voice shaking, the kind of, how do I do this? What if that happens? Those things that felt like a stretch to me were just part of their day job. This is just what they did. It feels new to you, but it's normal to us. Those of us who have spent and dedicated our lives to this practice. And that's the sort of ancient way of apprenticeship, the initiatory path. I really believe that you don't grow by pushing harder at your edges. Actually, you grow by being in an environment and a room where what feel like edges to you are just someone else's ordinary. Like the normalization of what you feel is really important. Things that those people have embodied through sustained practice. And the way that we train people at Sister Stories offers you a doorway into that path. So, like the circle compass, everything's threefold. Threefold transformation: personal, professional, collective. I'll talk you through them. We offer an experience which is so expansive and rich and deep. People often say there is life before the circle training and there's life after the circle training. And this works on so many levels. I've spoken to it in so much detail already, but in our training environment in particular, we often find that whatever personal wound is holding you back from leading in your unique way, it can alchemize in the container of circle. So the imposter syndrome that was named, the lack of confidence or visibility or voice or shame and grief about the world. I particularly am really suffering from deep grief about the world, and circle is one of the biggest tools I have to alchemize that. Burnout, overwhelm. There's this magical alchemy to circle where everything can soften and an easier way can emerge for you, whilst not sort of collapsing into simplicity. We don't bypass being human. We honor being human. And there's a really important distinction. And so Caroline was someone who'd done a lot of different practitioner trainings beforehand, a deeply skilled space holder. And she came in and she said, I've learned so much, not just intellectually and practically, but on a soul, deep soul level. When I started the course, I knew I had some further healing to do, especially around belonging in the sisterhood. Now I feel like I have taken my seat in the sisterhood and sewn the final few stitches of my witch wound. We were in a session and she literally said those words, I have taken my seat in the sisterhood. Deeply healing on a personal level for an accomplished practitioner. But let's talk about the professional side of it. I take this work really seriously. And so you get something that is robust and very comprehensive and deeply supportive. So there's a kind of structure that grounds your leadership in confidence and clarity. I'm just going to talk about the word leadership just for a moment. Some of you will recoil when I say that word. We have talked about starting a movement, continuing a movement, propagating a movement. It takes people to step forward. And I would argue that if we can do that in a generous and generative way, that is a new form of leadership in our world, one that's more relational. And so when I say leadership, no, I don't mean top-down stuff. I mean the circle kind, which is as non-hierarchical as it can be. And we really look in the training to identify what professional gap might exist for you so you can get it filled. And people are often surprised by, and well, not surprised, blown away by how much tangible benefit they get out of it. The confidence to hold and skill to hold any group space with depth and integrity in a way that transforms everyone in the circle profoundly. There's a couple of ways we do that. So I've mentioned this earlier. You will practice a circle and we will give you one-to-one supervision and high-level feedback and input on that. So you're not only part of a group, you also receive individual feedback. This course is CPD accredited, one of the most rigorous forms of accreditation you can get. And I got that for a couple of reasons. One, to really check for myself whether it was meeting that high threshold. You know, the integrity of this course is really important to me, but also from a professional point of view for each of you, so that you can go out there and hold spaces with the confidence of something really robust and accredited behind you. Really interestingly, a lot of our trainees at the moment are going to insurers and asking for insurance, and a lot of people are asking for a certification. And one insurer in particular said, who have you trained with? And asked to see our curriculum and the whole thing to approve this insurance, and it got approved. So that's wonderful. But, you know, the art of holding people in deep spaces is not to be taken lightly. And so we offer you those skills. And I'll talk about the long-term support that you get in a moment, because this is a very long-term holding that Sister Stories offers. So Cassie said, from a professional point of view, within weeks of starting the training, I took action on dreams I'd put off for years because I didn't feel ready, qualified, or confident enough. After being seen, held, taught, and tested in this space, I feel like I can finally feel my own value and worth and the things that make me special just as I am. We've talked about the collective many times. But what's interesting is where the collective sort of intersects with the individual. So there is something very powerful for you individually about rooting into collective impact. We have so many women who move from a sense of overwhelm to right action, coming in frozen, real political overwhelm, unmanageable anxiety or anger about the state of the world. And when within months, our students, sometimes even weeks actually, but often months, our students know what their thread of contribution is and hold it with this very tender yet confident sense of leadership. So let's talk about some of the things that women have done with it in recent months. I touched into some of this. Circles for Iranian women in the diaspora. When the Iran war broke out, one of our trainees immediately started holding circles for women in her community all over the world. Incredibly powerful. With the atrocities of ICE in January, there were trainees out there holding circles on the front lines of protests in Minneapolis. We've talked about Jane the GP, people holding circles for Amnesty International. We've got singing circles, circles in local communities, circles around family dinner tables, circles in every imaginable space. So let's talk about how this actually happens, because, there's a lot of soul and flow, but there's also real structure and containment. So we work through 9 pillars in blocks of 3. The first is deeply personal, vision and mission, what you're doing here, a real deepening of what we've gone into today, a real sense of rooting into the tradition of this work, what has gone before, a deep honouring of those who held this work when patriarchy and white supremacy and capitalism tried to suppress it. And we really root into your personal lineage and identity so that you have very solid ground to stand on starting this work. And then we get really practical. Like, okay, how do you actually hold a space? So we look at anti-oppression in practice. We spend a lot of time diving into the ethical facilitator, how you can hold spaces really well, confident that you're not going to cause harm, confident that you have the sort of backbone and spine to your soulful space. And we really look at the art of holding space. So tools and techniques and frameworks and really tangible ways of holding. And the framework that I teach is applicable to holding any group space. So people often come in to hold circles, and then before they know it, they're in their corporate job, holding a Monday meeting full of 10 men where they're actually doing a kind of circle check-in for their business meeting. There are so many applications to this. And it's worth saying, although I talk about holding women, what I teach you is not gender specific. And so we have many people going out and holding either mixed gender spaces or spaces with men. That's entirely possible. So you take that basic framework that will stand you in really good stead, and you either do it as I teach it and experiment with that, or you bring your own unique lens. And that's what we cover in the final 3 pillars. How do you actually translate this out into the world? How do you meet your desire? How does your desire to hold grief circles or celebration circles or circles for people who are in early postpartum, or circles for parents of neurodivergent children? We could go on about the different ways people take it. How do you actually meld together the theory of what you're learning with the practice of your individual space? And how do you market it? I saw a few people share earlier about the hardest thing is getting people in the room, or I'm worried no one will show up. I really, really believe in demystifying marketing. So we don't think we need a massive social media following, because we really don't. There are ways to spread the work about your circle that feels so in integrity and soulful that it's like creative expression as opposed to trying to pitch or sell or market your space. And then you go out into the world to be a flame bearer of this work. I often feel my job in this role is to tend the central fire of circle, to invite all of you to light your torches at this central fire and to take them out into your community, lighting those little fires everywhere that we were talking about earlier. So that's all you learn, but we have introduced new things this year to make it even easier for you to take action. So we've got integration practices between our key pillars to begin to bring together the threads of the work in really practical, tangible, applicable ways. And we're introducing something brand new, which is if you're someone who does a course and finds it hard to put everything in practice, we're going to have an implementation week where we have so many hands-on sessions to make sure you actually do the thing that you want to do and do the bits that you need to do to get it off the ground and launch your circles in our time together, because we can all learn the theory, but my passion is for you to actually go out there and do it. So we're going to have even more hands-on support to help you do that. And another wonderful part of this is our enrichment program. So there are so many sessions that we offer alongside those pillars where you can learn from world-class guest teachers. I'll introduce you to those in a minute, where you can really get a sense of how to hold the circles the world needs right now. So diving into the broader aspects of circle and space holding, from grief, anger, holding space for a broad spectrum of stories. You are held in circle yourself so many times throughout this training. I talked about the importance of you being held. Part of your apprenticeship is to be deeply held in the space. And you are in that process apprenticing to a genuinely diverse range of women who offer you both their experience and their craft and their holding. And I'm really offering you this as a foundation for life. This is a lifelong skill. So we have all that detailed supervision and feedback that we talked about, the certification, the sacred business and soulful marketing guidance. You get lifetime access to the content, so you can return again and again as you evolve and you go around the spiral of this work. And you get long-term access to our alumni container. So this is not a course where I wave you off at the end and say, goodbye, have a nice life. It's been nice knowing you. I am trying to build my own contribution to a movement. And that means that I want to see people who come into this space thrive long term. So we have a free space every quarter where you can come and be held by me and the team and celebrate and receive guidance and be in community with this movement of women doing this work. And you can do that whether you trained last week or whether you trained 8 years ago. This is a free, ongoing space I offer. Everybody tells me it's a terrible idea from a business perspective. I don't care. I love having this on long-term holding. It really matters to me that this just doesn't become another course that you never complete and never do anything with. We want to support you long term. And that ties in with accountability. You know, there's so many, I think that accountability holds a really important role. So optional things that we offer you, weekly study and check-in sessions where you can ask questions, receive coaching, work through materials, really stay anchored in what we're doing. The wonderful Emma Johnson, who I talked about earlier, is our dedicated community manager. Her holding is exquisite and she really offers a holding for you with deep care and insight, and crucially having been in your shoes. She did this training 4 years ago. She knows it inside out. She knows what it's like to be a participant. You get that really detailed, specific and clear personalized feedback on your facilitation. And there's real practice sessions and support groups. So you can build trust and really experience and a sense of sisterhood. So many people stay in contact with the people they meet in this training for many years to come. And I'll be kind of checking my phone, I'll get a message of people holding a retreat together. It's glorious. I'm going to quickly talk about who the mentors are. So there's me, you've met me, you've heard about me. I'm just going to say 1 or 2 lines about kind of my experience and credentials in the holding of this work. So there are many things that I have done alongside this path. I talked about my documentary work. I've trained as a coach. I'm a trained narrative therapist, working with story as therapy. I'm a trained conflict mediator. I've done endless anti-oppression work. I'm an apprentice to grief tending. I am constantly a student of this work. And so my constant apprenticeship is part of your learning. And so I hold all of our core calls and many things in between. Emma is an exquisite facilitator in addition to her role that I just laid out. And she will hold you in many spaces during our training, having been in your shoes. And then we've got Amelia Doncourt, who also did this training herself, I think in 2018 or 2019. My memory is a bit hazy about the timeline, pre-COVID. And she has taken this work and she started with circles in her living room. And now she is a really sought after facilitator in all sorts of spaces, including corporates. She's also an actor, and so she does work with voice and anger, and she does our anti-oppression work. She's a multi-skilled facilitator who you will get to know during our time together. And then we've got a whole host of world-class guest teachers. Holiday Phillips talks to you in the most exquisite way and does a really powerful session around leadership as values out in the world in action. She did it for the first time about a month ago. We were blown away by the quality of her holding. She's an excellent teacher, and she really moved something in the women in the room to kind of get out there and be living their values through their circles. Rachel Maddox, one of my business mentors, she talks to you about how to soulfully sustain this as a practice in terms of getting it off the ground and marketing and all that jazz. Abby Osho is an extraordinary facilitator who has deep experience of holding space for challenging stories and holding mixed groups. She does an excellent session on her experience of space holding, including being a facilitator in a BAFTA-winning documentary called White Nanny, Black Child, which is some of the most powerful facilitation I have ever seen on camera. She was behind that. We've got Claire Rother, who's our trauma teacher. She's one of many trauma teachers that I have trained with over the years in the work of trauma. And the reason that she is in this training is she's the most practically, she gives such a simple and practical application about how you can think about in terms of your circles. What do you do if someone gets really dysregulated? What do you do if you get dysregulated? How do you handle trauma in your space? Claire is the woman for that. We've got Ava Glamaris, who works with ancestry and lineage and identity. She holds a specific group for global majority women in that work. She's been a teacher of mine for a long time. And then finally, and we've got a little moon sort of person, because we have a couple of different grief mentors who talk to us, but it is someone who is deeply apprenticed in the craft of holding grief and will offer their wisdom to you. This is what someone who trained a few years ago said when I said, like, how's this worked out for you as a long-term thing to have committed to? She said, there was a real consideration for me about the cost, but it's given me back the value back tenfold. There's so many other benefits and so much in the course I still go back to every time I plan a circle. It really is the foundation of what I do. I love it's a personal journey too. I feel like I'm fully myself now in the world, as well as in the spaces I hold, and it's all from the training. I'm conscious of the time, and so I'm going to move through these words quickly. Sandeep, deep gratitude for the care, inclusion, and sheer professionalism. There's immense value in your facilitation support. I'm already applying what I've learned. Umberine said, it's made me a better doctor to my patients, and she's done work with this practice in the NHS and in Amnesty International. This is Olivia Fern. If you don't know her music, I really recommend you go and check it out. She is the artist who was playing at the beginning of this circle, and she did this training and went on to do an Arts Council project for singing circles, where she held 150 women in circle with the power of song. It was completely extraordinary. And I could go on with the sharing and the stories. And so what you'll walk away with is that recognised CPD accredited qualification, a real tangible framework for powerful circle facilitation, the ability to design and lead transformational circles and retreats, that inner shift that you've been craving, which we touched on in the beginning, it always happens in this space. Truly, that shift always happens. And I can only say that with confidence now, having held so many people through this experience. A living practice of ritual presence and relational leadership and sacred community and connection. So let's talk about the key details. The tuition fee for everything I've talked about, all of the sessions, the mentors, the being held in circles, lifetime access to the course, the long-time alumni container, is £2,750. And at the moment, we're doing early bird enrolment. So this course normally starts in October. But one of the pieces of feedback that we get is sometimes we share about this a few weeks before, and people say, I want more notice, I want more lead up, I want more time. So for those who want to start this and know it's for you, we are offering some lovely early bird enrolment bonuses. I'm going to be doing a free in-person retreat day in London, which is like a ceremonial initiation into this path for you in person, in the flesh, before we've ever met online. And Emma and I are going to be holding an intimate circle journey for a small group of you who step in now before the training begins. So you join us now, and across the rest of the summer and into the autumn, we hold you on that path. The core time we meet is at Thursdays at 1 o'clock for 90 minutes or 7 o'clock for 90 minutes every second Thursday. That's UK time. You can do a time zone conversions. You can choose your cohort that you commit to. And we want you running circles by the end of 2026 and probably before, especially if you are to start now. And so let's talk about next steps. Actually, I'm going to talk about this. We did a survey of trainees, and 100% of those who responded said it exceeded their expectations. We take this work really seriously. We take your investment seriously. We take your time seriously. We want this to be an exquisite experience for you, and the feedback that we have is that it exceeds those expectations. So I'm conscious of the time. Here are some next steps. Some of you will be like, I want to do this. If you just know, book in. You can join us. Some people just take the leap and they come into our experience and they fly. If that's you, Emma will pop the link in the chat. Go ahead. I'll be doing a Q&A tomorrow about this at 12 till 1 o'clock UK time. There'll be a replay, but I encourage you to bring your questions live about this work. I also have a small limited number of one-to-one calls with me to check if this is right for you. I don't want to persuade anyone in. The reason that this training works so well is we get the right people in the room. So if you're like, oh, I feel like I want to do it, but I'm not sure, book a call with me. And then you can step into the circle and receive these early bird bonuses and this holding. We've been together for several hours. It has been such an honour to hold this space for you. And some of you I will go on and work with, and some of you will take what you learned tonight, what you felt into tonight, and do your own thing. And I really want to thank you. It feels very precious to be in a space like this where so many of us believe in the same thing, where there's just this, like the hope in this room, the desire for something better. Yes, early bird is available until the 20th of July. Thank you, Loretta. The 20th of July. And so if you're thinking about it, come and talk to me. We're in the inbox. We do the Q&A. We'll be sending you lots of emails over the next 10 days to help you fit into it. But if you know it's yours, just step in. People who know never regret it. Mel, the one-to-one, Emma's just put the link in the chat, how to do that. And you'll get an email with a link tomorrow as well. I want to close by just, maybe we can collectively think of that image together of those little fires everywhere. A world where person after person after person is creating circle after circle after circle, and each holding their thread of contribution and change. And so to close, I invite you to share perhaps just a word in the chat about how you're leaving today's space. Inspired, hopeful, gratitude, refreshed and inspired, energized, hopeful, clarity, deep in thought, nourished, a bit overwhelmed. Thank you for naming that, Valerie. Sometimes that does happen. We've covered a lot of ground. That is okay. There's real gentleness to you. Hopeful and excited. Soft and thoughtful, excited but calm at the same time, connected to something bigger. Beautiful. Well, to close, if you have a candle, let's just take a moment to blow it out. And I'm going to end this call in a moment by inviting you all to unmute. And so if your system might get overwhelmed by that, you might want to step out of the space now. We're just going to close with a final goodbye. So if you want to unmute and say goodbye, please do that. Bye, everyone.
Lovely.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Everyone.